Hi, we're now live. I'll wait a few minutes just while people join. If you want to use the live chat and tell me where you're from, that'll be good. So you can check your audio and hopefully can all hear me. Today, well, I'm in the UK, so today for me is 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Welcome from anybody who's anywhere else. I believe Christopher's in Japan, which means it's quite late for you. I think anybody Japan, Australia, maybe you want to sleep and watch this later. This will be recorded. Hello from France. Hi, France. Hi, Pierre. I guess if you're in the States, then you're just waking up or it's very early. But hopefully this is a suitable time for most people. And if not, then like I said, it is recorded. I can watch it again unless there's a huge amount of people who say, no, it must be a different time. So you can all check your audio. Let's see. Today it's basically summer in the UK. I think today is, well, hopefully not the only day we get. It's about, 20 degrees in the south of England. It's roughly that where I am. We're about a month after the last one, I think. The last Discover Dorico session. Pensacola, Florida, 10 a.m. Yeah, okay, so not too bad. It's midnight in Japan, yes. I'm surprised you're still up, but thank you for joining us. So today's session is going to be on playback things in Dorico. So hopefully you're all enjoying version 1.0.30. If you haven't updated, then please do so after this session. That version came out just after our last Discover Dorico session, the February session. We did look at some of the things that were in that new version. So this session, we're going to look at various playback things that you can do in Dorico. Why you the things you want to do, what the changes you're allowed to make, the different things you can do with it. I know some people aren't as bothered about playback in notation programs, but those people are generally quite a lot cleverer than me. I like at least some playback to know that I've got things right and they're sounding right put together. I also just wanted to start with a couple of things that I have set up Dorico wise to make things a bit easier and the way I use it, just in case it's any different from the way you guys do. So at the moment I'm on a Mac. I'm just going to go into the preferences section, which is Dorico preferences. Or if you're on PC, then it's in the edit menu. There's edit preferences. In here, if you scroll to the bottom, then there's a couple of options in here. One is this Open VST plugin windows when opening projects. If when you open a project in Dorico, you get the Halium window appear at the same time as the project's opening, that's what this little tick option does, and it will show you Halium loading. Some people want that, they like to see it, and maybe they even have that on a different monitor. But especially if you're just working on one screen, you may find it useful to untick that option, as I have, so that Halium doesn't pop up when you're loading a project. I also happen to have show playhead when stopped. I've got that unticked. So when the music is stopped, when it's not playing for me, I don't see the green playback line. That's your own personal preference, really, but just so you know which one I'm using. I'm just having a quick look comments-wise. The image is quite soft focus. If you play with the settings option in YouTube, just in the bottom right hand corner of the video, you can change the quality setting, and hopefully if you choose something like 720p, then that's not too bad. It's now okay. Great. Okay. So I just wanted to show a couple of those options that I have, well, not ticked in this case, preferences wise. Also, while I'm looking at a couple of menu options, when you're in play mode in Dorico, there's an option for playback options, which I don't think has necessarily been mentioned a huge amount yet. Now, this one has some useful playback settings in it that you can use. So for example, there is a dynamic curve option here, but if you scroll down a bit, there are also some other options where you can adjust things like accents. So do you want the written dynamic to increase slightly when you put an accent on the note, or a marcato symbol on a note? And timing wise, in the timing section up here, you can also change things like how long a staccato note is, or how long a tenuto or a legato note is, and you can change that by the percentage of the written duration. So you may find if sometimes with other sample libraries, or just the your own personal preferences, you might want to tweak some of the playback options. So you can use this playback. It's kind of almost a hidden menu. I felt it almost kind of got Daniel will probably disagree with me, but it kind of slipped into Dorico as oh yeah, it's there. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it wasn't always there. And actually relatively soon, it should have a shortcut attached to it as well. So like with lots of the other options, then you'll be able to open that with a shortcut as well. So various other things and kind of playback things. Now, some of these are going to be relatively obvious, I suppose, or you might think they're obvious. But when I've been talking to various people and training various people, some of the options are used by lots of people all the time, and some of them go, oh, I didn't realize that little extra thing existed. So just to kind of cover everything, and hopefully then we won't miss anything. So playback wise, you've got some buttons up here in the top right hand corner. You can use the play button, and there's also one here which is the rewind to the beginning button. There's also, if you want it, there's a little pop out option here for the transport bar, so you can press that and you can have the transport bar pop out. I don't personally use that very much, but some people do want that. Again, you can move that to another monitor if you want to put it somewhere else. Hi, Steve. It's been a while. How are you? Just reading the comments. So they may be useful for some people. The ones I tend to use personally are more of the shortcuts. So you can use the space bar and it will play and stop Dorico. I'm sure everybody's used that one. What that actually does is play from where the playhead currently is. Now, in my case, because I've shown you in the preferences, I have that turned off. I've no idea really, apart from looking at the time here that says I'm in bar 43 and a bit. I don't really know where the playhead is. So I do sometimes just use the space bar, but not all the time. Other options I often use is I'll select a note or a rest and then press P, which is very similar to another notation program, of course, Sibelius. So you can just select a note, press P, and it will play from that selection. You can also use a few other things. So you can use Shift spacebar, which will play from the last start position. So I press Shift spacebar. Now, if I happen to select something else, let's say down here, I wanted to put a dynamic in, for example, or do anything else, then I can still press Shift spacebar and it will still play from the same point it played from before. So Shift spacebar can be very useful when you have added something and you just want to play that same section again and hear what the changes that you've made. There's also another shortcut I use quite a lot, which is so that was Shift spacebar, which is Alt Shift spacebar, which plays from the start of the flow. So when I'm often I'm inputting music, or if you're composing, you sometimes just want to say, right, now what does all of this sound like from the beginning? And that's Alt Shift spacebar. Now, if you have a numeric keypad on your keyboard, which I don't at the moment, but do sometimes depending on which keyboard's plugged in, then there are also some Cubase style play shortcuts you can use. So if you have a numeric keypad, then the enter button on the numeric keypad will also play Dorico. There's also the full stop, or the dot, I suppose. It's not a full stop on the numeric keypad, but that dot will do the return to 0, or the start. And then the 0, the number 0 on your numeric keypad is stop. So if you are a Cubase user and you use those shortcuts in Cubase, then you'll find they're also mapped inside Dorico. So you can choose your favorite of how you prefer to press play and stop and anything else, all of those shortcuts and things you want to do. And of course, you can change them in our key commands list. I'm not changing any of mine because that obviously doesn't help any of you guys learn anything. And I do like the way that our playback controls work, but you can choose your own favorite. One of the other things you'll find useful, of course, for playback is our mixer. Now there is a little button up here in the top corner of the screen which shows our mixer, or the shortcut is F3, which is what I commonly use. So pressing F3 will show you the mixer. Now in here, excuse me a second. You of course have faders for all of the various instruments in here, and the mixer can be moved around as you've seen me dragging it around. You can drag that around if you want to put it on another monitor. Or sometimes you just have it sat at the bottom of the current one. Place that wherever you like it. But not all of the options in here I don't think have ever necessarily been explained or used. So in the mixer, if you need to, you can resize the mixer and show more or less faders. But you may find that you still don't have enough space on your screen. So these plus and minus buttons will make all of the faders slightly narrower or slightly wider. So you can make them fit on your monitor size. This is a MacBook, so it's 15-inch, so it's not too bad to show me this number of faders, but you can play with that. If you do have a lot of faders on, you can also, if you use a trackpad, for example, and some mice will do this, you can scroll left and right. So I'm just using a 2-finger scroll on the MacBook, which will let me scroll left and right in the faders. But generally, it's more useful to make this slightly shorter. And as long as I know which faders are which, when labeled at the bottom, then I can adjust those as necessary. We also have buttons to turn off things. So these 3 buttons in the top left corner, you can turn off all of the instrument faders, you can turn off the effects fader, and you can turn off the output fader. And as I toggle those, they just flash on and off. There's also 2 buttons at the top here, M and S, which is not Marks and Spencer's. So they're mute and solo. If I was to mute some of the instruments in here, then it may be that you have quite a lot of instruments, that you've decided to mute, and it's a bit of a pain to then go and unmute them all one by one. So the M button up here will deactivate all of the mutes that you currently have. And the same with the solo button. So if you soloed a bunch of instruments, then you can also press this button, which will then deactivate the solo on all of those as well. I think some people have kind of gone, oh, look, oh, that button doesn't do anything. Well, it doesn't do anything until you actually have a mute that you can cancel. There's also 2 buttons here for inserts, EQ, and sends. Now, the EQ one is probably fairly self-explanatory, enables the EQ section. Now, admittedly, some bits of this mixer, I think, will probably change design-wise and could potentially be nicer, but they will all work if you need to use these. So you can press the power button for enable EQ, and you've got up to 4 sections, and you can adjust the gain, the frequency, and the Q value for any of those frequencies if you want to on an individual instrument basis. We also have an insert section and a send section. I'm going to turn both of those on at the same time. Now, by default, to be kind of useful, what we've done here is we've sent some of every single channel to, and you can't quite tell on here because mine's a bit small, but to an FX reverb. So this is where the mixer starts to kind of come together a bit. So this reverb channel here, which on mine is shown in purple, we're sending some of every instrument over to that FX channel. And then on the FX channel, which is this last one here, we have already enabled the reverence reverb. So all you need to do if you want to use it is just press this power button, which will turn on the reverb for everything in your score. So the easiest way to just add a bit of reverb to absolutely everything is just to hit that power button, because the inserts are already sending something. Now you can adjust this if you want to send more or less of one or more instruments. You can adjust those if you wish. If I turn that turn the sends off for a minute and just have a look at the inserts. So here now, if I want to adjust the reverb and the settings, I can press the little E, and I will get the reverb VST plugin pop up, the Reverence plugin. This is the for some reason it's Daniel Spreadbury's favorite big shiny silver knob. I don't know why. It is. He loves this one. Anyway, the browse button will let you then choose the type of reverb. So I've chosen an Austrian concert hall here, but you can flick through all of these and choose. Maybe you prefer the one in New York or the Old French Theatre. You can choose any of those, and then from there you can then tweak any of the settings for this this reverb. And you've got there's also a gain on the end there. And so you can then very easily say, what does that sound like compared to my existing dry sound, just by toggling the power button, and that will turn the power on and off to that reverb. So just when you're composing, it's sometimes you don't want the sounds to be quite so dry. You just like to add a bit more of an effect, and you can do that in its entirety on the whole score. But of course, the inserts also, you could just add a wah-wah or a flanger to one particular instrument. Maybe if you're transcribing a Snarky Puppy solo, and you want to actually put the effects that they had, the effects pedals they have on the saxophone or the trumpet, for example, you can do that on an individual instrument as well. But by default, we've just sent some of everything to this FX fader, so you can do it on a global basis. So just to add a bit more life to how things sound. So sometimes when you're kind of saying, well, actually, I don't like the sound of that sample, it maybe just adding a bit of reverb will help. But what happens if you want to change the samples and everything else that Dorico is using? So I'll just close the mixer. So by default, when you're in setup mode and you add an instrument to Dorico, what it does is it says, right, if you're adding, for example, a violin, it will automatically find the right sample in Halion to load the violin for you. Now, at the moment in setup mode, although we have a solo player and a section player, unfortunately at the moment, Dorico loads the same solo sound for both of those. In the future, I'm sure that the section players will add the section violin sound, but at the moment, you won't get that. So when I started on this, which of course is a Schubert symphony, the symphony he never finished, as it says, one of the things I wanted to do was I go into play mode, and for the Halion player here, I just click on the little E symbol, and that will load my Halion player. Now, of course, mine didn't show by default when I opened the score, so I just pressed the little E button to bring that one up. And then what I've done is, you can see already here for my violins, if I click the little down arrow, and if I was to search for a violin in this top box here, then violin solo combi is the sound that gets loaded by default. But you can see what I've done is I've just chosen from the list the violins 1A combi. And then for my violin 2, I've chosen violin 2 combi. So I've chosen the section sounds for this orchestra instead of the solo sounds. I've also done that for the violas, because for this particular piece, and the range as well, the viola was slightly scratchy for what I wanted, and the section sound is going to be obviously much better, and the same for the cellos. So for a lot of those, I've then added and changed just the sample that I want to use. So now when I go back to Dorico, all I need to do is press save, and next time I open the project, it will automatically load those samples in just for this project. It doesn't change the defaults in Dorico, but it will change it for this project, so that I then get the section sound that I wanted instead. Now, there are other things, of course, that these samples do, and that Dorico's set up automatically, and some of the things you can change. Now, some of those are to do with key switches. Now, for anybody who's going, oh, I've heard about those, and I think they're really complicated, bear with me. I'm going to explain what's set up by default and how you can change things if you really want to, and and how all of this is kind of how it's all linked up. So key switches, the key switches are designed. So, for example, in Halion here, you can see you've got a set of white notes at the bottom here. So I'm selected a flute at the moment. I'll go to a violin again, because that's what we were talking about earlier. So when I choose the violin, it shows me the white notes, which is the range of samples that we have. We also have down here some yellow notes. Now, the idea is that if you were to be playing Halion live, so if you had a keyboard in front of you and you were playing this live, you'd be playing probably with the right hand on all the white notes, all right, black and white notes, but this range here. And with your left hand, you can use the key switches. So, for example, when you want a spiccato, you can press that. Well, it says A sharp, B flat to me, and that will then change the samples that are playing to be spiccato instead. Or if you chose this one here, it would be a pizzicato tight. So you, if you were to play it live, that's what you'd do. You'd press that key at the same time as playing some of the others. These keys down here don't make any sound, so you're not going to hear that note as you press it, but it will change the sample that's been played. And in the middle up here, it's showing you the expressions and the options that you have for this for these violins, and it also lists the switch that's used, the key switch, that is what it's called. Now, Dorico, you don't want to do that. In Dorico, all you want to do is you want to come over to a part, let's say this cello part. This isn't going to be correct, but never mind. And you want to press Shift P for a playing technique, and you just want to write pits, and it will display pits on the score. Now, Dorico will now play that back to you, and we'll play the pizzicato. So let's look at what it's actually doing at that point. So, so in play mode, you can go to Play and Expression Maps. An expression map setup lists all of the options for all of the instruments for expression maps. So I'm going to choose the cellos because that's the one I just added pizzicato to. And in the techniques list for pizzicato, it says it's going to do key switch 25, which for Halion is correct to then play pizzicato. So this is where you can see Dorico is set up automatically. Sorry, there's an ice cream van just gone past. Sorry about that. If you can hear that, I don't know if it picks up on the microphone. It really is that warm here today. So you can change and you can select the pizzicato and say, all you need to do is write it on the score, and Dorico is automatically set up to do the key switch automatically, 25, which is the MIDI note value, to play the right note for you. So you don't need to worry about it. It's all set up exactly as you want it. Now, there are a couple of things at the moment that aren't hooked up properly. So, for example, trills, I think at the moment is one of the things where there are half note and whole note trills, which won't play back yet in Dorico. But they are set up in the expression map. So once we've hooked up the other bit of it in Dorico, then they will also play back in Halion, for example. Now, the way this is linked up, to kind of look at all the finer points as well, is that the cello here, for example, knows it's using Halion Sonic, and the Halion Sonic rack here has a little cog, and the cog says that for the cello, it's actually going to use HSO Cello Combi, which is the expression map option we just looked at in expression maps setup. So that's all fine and good, but what happens if you don't want to use Halion? If you want to use something else and you still want expression maps and things to work correctly? So, for example, if I press the plus button at the bottom down here in my in the rack, so I'm right down the bottom here in bottom corner of the screen, then that plus button will load an extra item in my VST instrument rack. So from here, I can choose an option. So maybe I've got a piano part and I want Halion 6 to play it, because Halion 6 has a really nice new Eagle piano, which I know Daniel's used in some of his examples, either in the blog or in some recent videos. And that piano is really nice. So maybe you want to use Halion. Or maybe you want to use, in my case, I've got a Garatan personal orchestra installed. So it shows up here. And now this particular one, I'm not favoring one over Vienna Symphonic Library or anything else. It's just one I happen to have installed. This aria player, which is where Garatan shows up in Dorico, it has two options, which is the VST one and a VST multi. Just to explain the difference between them, the aria player VST, when it sends everything back, or sends the sound back to Dorico, it will show up in the mixer just as one fader. So all of the instruments that you send to the aria player will only show it up in Dorico as one fader, which might be enough if you're, for example, if you're mixing it yourself anyway in Garatan, then that's fine. But I tend to use the aria player VST multi so that every instrument that I use from aria, from Garatan Personal Orchestra, will show up as its own fader in Dorico, which is more like what all of the other instruments do in Dorico. but it also means that I can mix all of those instruments. If I need to tweak them over and above any of the dynamics I've entered, then I can tweak all of the instruments individually. So I choose the ARIA Player VST Multi. So now that's showing up in my rack here. For my cello part, if I want it to play using the ARIA Player, I just need to now choose it for my cello. So I'm overriding, I suppose, the default, and now I've chosen that one. And I'm just going to put it in slot 1 on the ARIA Player. So now I press the little E button over here, so I'm on the right-hand side again, and I press the little E button, which will load the Garytan Personal Orchestra ARIA Player. And in slot 1, because that's where I said my cello was going to be, I will choose the Personal Orchestra 5, notation, I'm a notation program, and section strings, because it's a section I want. I'm going to choose cellos, and I'm going to choose this one, which is cellos KS. KS is the key switch version. So there are lush and tremolo and everything else, but the key switch version has the key switches to do lots of these other things like pizzicatos, all in this one sample. So I've chosen the KS version. So normally, if there is a KS version, a key switch version of that sound, that's the one that you want to pick when you're using Dorico. So now if I go back to Dorico, so I've loaded the sample in. So now in here, so well, that's all fine, but the pizzicato isn't going to play yet because it doesn't know how to do that. So if I go to my play menu and my expression maps, now in the end, what you will hopefully be able to do is import library or potentially import a Cubase expression map. If you have already set up, in my case, Garytan Personal Orchestra or whichever sample library you're using, if you've got an expression map already in Cubase that you want to use, you can import the Cubase expression map. If we or anybody else using Dorico has already set up something like Garytan Personal Orchestra, you could import a library, you could import the options that they've set. I'm currently looking at a GPO one, so maybe in the future we will have an expression map for that already set. But if you don't already have one, then here's how you'd set one up. So I could take, for example, the HSO cello combi, and if I press duplicate, then it will create one at the bottom here with a little star to tell me I've edited it. I'm going to, on the right-hand side, click this padlock button just so that I can edit it. And I'm going to change the name of this, so it's called GPO cello combi instead. I'll also change the ID. And I'll change the plugin as well, because this will be for GPO 5. Now, for the pizzicato technique that I want to use, I should change all of them, but I'm just going to change the pizzicato technique at the moment. It says at the moment that's key switch 25. And you'll see if I click on one of the others, then they change to be the varying key switches depending on what they're using. But the pizzicato one by default was using key switch 25. Now, only because I've been reading the manual for Garytan Personal Orchestra, I know that the key switch I actually want for them instead is key switch 5. So I'm just going to change that for my GPO cello combi and press OK. Now I need to also tell, one last step, my cello that it is going to use that. So over here with this little cog, I can say that slot 1, because here I've got my ARIA player, is using slot 1. In slot 1, I want to say you need to use the GPO cello combi expression map. Press OK. So now it's all set up. So if I go back to this one here where I've written pizzicato on the cello, when I press play, and I'm going to use shift spacebar to replay the same section again. So now I get pizzicato written for the cello. Now, it's not correct, but then if Schubert never finished it, maybe I can edit it. So now you can see kind of where all the bits are all joined up. So just kind of to recap, if you just want to change the sound that the Halion player is using, so when I had my violins, I can just go into here, into the Halion option, and I can just choose a new sound. Then I could just change, and I can choose I want a solo sound, or I want a section sound, or anything else. If you wanted to use a different sample player, then you can add that in the VST instrument rack here. And VST 3 options will show up. So I believe that East-West Play is, in the last week, has been now made VST 3 compatible. So you may well be able to get an update for that one. So it will also show here by default as a VST instrument, and you can set that up. And if you then want to, if you already have an expression map, then you can import it. And if not, then you could create an expression map if you wanted to. I would have a search around on the internet first, because I'm sure lots of other people have created expression maps. But then you can set them up. So then you can say for any one instrument, you can choose which section of your rack you want to use. So do you want to use Halion or Aria in my case? And then you put it into a slot. And don't forget on this little cog over here to tell it which of the expression map options you want to use. And then you'll get all of those options that you need. You may say, well, hang on, this is it's quite complicated to set up. Well, this is also, I suppose, the way that it happens in Cubase or in a sequencer, because they're just using a track. Then by default, you start with opening a track, and then you give it a sample, and you might decide which expression maps you want to use. So when you get away from the defaults that we've set up with Halion, because we can load Halion automatically due to an API connection, we can't do that for the other sample players, so you do need to load the samples in yourself. So what you might find is useful at the moment is in setup mode, if you then take this and you could say, well, I want to save as, maybe this is going to be by playback template. So if I say playback template, I might have already done one, so I'll say 3. So I could effectively make a template from this, and the easiest way to do it is probably just to delete the flow down here. So if you select the flow, press the delete button, then it will delete all the music from here, but you'll still have all the players, and you'll still have all of the play options set up and all of the links through to what they use. So if you want this as a template, an orchestral template to use tomorrow, you could then tomorrow open the playback template you've set up, just press plus, add a new flow, tick the instruments that you want to use, and the playback would already be set up as it was the day before. So you have those kind of those options. We don't have a a template option at the moment in Dorico where you can kind of set everything up and save it as a template, but saving a file is just going to do basically the same job for you. I'm just going to quickly check some comments just to make sure, see if there's anything anybody's talking about. There's a comment about this is a long way around to do things, though. I'm sure the majority of users want something that plugs into this software. Well, yes, and that's why the Halion option exists. So by default, when you add an instrument to Dorico, that's exactly what happens. It automatically will assign the correct HSO sound, and it will assign the correct HSO expression map. That was the bit we started at the beginning. I was just explaining that if you wanted to then use something else, East-West, Garritan, or anything else, the new Halion 6, then you may then need to look at those other options for either how to load in the specific sound for that instrument, and you may then need to edit some expression maps. And yes, sorry, if it's all way over your head, then that's I suppose the point is, don't worry about it. As in fact, as Paul's just said, use the default HSO. So if I add a new instrument to this, then as soon as I add an instrument, and pick one, whatever you like, alto saxophone, I'm sure Schubert would love one, then by default, we will automatically have assigned everything for you. So it will automatically get assigned the right sample. It will, as soon as you put some notes in, it will play the right sample and everything else. That's all done. Hi, Paul. He just said hi. Can we not get a better Halion that's already there? Potentially. I suppose as far as Steinberg's concerned, we released Dorico first, and we gave with Dorico then is the current version of Halion when it was all released. They have since, and it's only in I think the last month, released the new version. I'm not sure what all of the changes are. I said there is a very nice new piano in it, but it would take more hooking up and integrating. So yes, potentially one day we can add some extra options. What I would say is, if you go back to the beginning of this session when we were just adding some nice effects and things, sometimes just adding a reverb will make things actually sound a bit nicer and a bit less harsh anyway. So maybe just start with one of those options. So again, I'm limited time-wise in these sessions to exactly the kind of things we can cover, but hopefully that gives you a admittedly fairly quick, but hopefully fairly in-depth view of lots of the things you can do playback wise and how it's all plugged together, what the defaults are. So with Halion, all the defaults are set up for you. But when you want to change it and start using other sample libraries and other options, and you say, I'd like to make this a bit better, please, how you can plug all of those things in together. And as I said, a lot of this, we're also adding things and changing things. So I'm sure some of the things in the mixer may well change at some point, but the functionality is all there if you want to use it, and the VST effects. We may also release, or other people, third parties may release expression maps that are specific for Dorico as well, so that you can use some of those with some of your instruments. So I'm going to end there. Now, the next Discover Dorico session is due to be, it's the last Thursday of the month. So it'll be Thursday, the 27th of April. It'll be the same time. So whatever time you started in your time zone, it will be the same time zone, same time in your time zone. If you have any questions about these sessions or any suggestions for what to cover in the next session, I've got an idea for the next session, but I'm always willing to hear from people as to things that they would also like to include. And if I can answer anybody else's questions, then email on Discover Dorico, which is all one word, discoverdorico@steinberg.de. This video is recorded, so feel free to go and watch it again later. And let me just check and make sure there's no other comments that with happening at the moment. No, Paul's answered some of the questions for me, so that's great. So yes, so any other questions, just feel free to email me, discoverdorico@steinberg.de. My name's John, and I'll see you all in a month. So Thursday, the 27th of April, if not before. Thank you. Bye.